I'm 77 years old, and I want to tell you about the house I built. Not literally. I'm not a carpenter. I'm a retired accountant from Cleveland, Ohio. I don't mean a physical house. I mean the architecture of a life. The structure I put together piece by piece over 50 years, carefully, methodically, with every decision aimed at making the whole thing look exactly right. The house looked beautiful from the outside. I promise you it did. My name is Frank. I married Gloria in 1973. We had 3 children. I drove a sensible car. I paid my taxes on time, every year for 52 years, without once filing late. I took pride in that. I had a savings account and a retirement account and a modest investment portfolio. My lawn was mowed. My gutters were cleaned. My life was, by every visible measure, in excellent order. And somewhere in the middle of all that order, I stopped living in the house I built. I moved into the structure. I occupied it. I maintained it. But I wasn't present in it, the way a person should be present in their own life. I was busy managing it, making sure nothing broke, making sure everything looked right from the curb. I was, without realizing it, running a property, not living a life. Gloria tried to tell me. She has a way of saying things that are very true, very gently, which I sometimes think I used against her. The gentleness made them easy to deflect. She'd say, "Frank, when did you last do something just because you wanted to?" And I'd say, "I do things I want all the time." And she'd say, "Like what?" And I'd think about it and say something like, "I reorganized the garage last weekend." And she'd look at me in this very specific way, not unkind, not mocking, and say, "That's not what I mean." I didn't know what she meant, or I did, and I refused to. What she meant was this: I had optimized my life out of joy. Every hour was accounted for. Every weekend had a project. Every vacation was planned months in advance, with an itinerary and a budget and a contingency. There was no room for the accidental moment, the spontaneous decision, the thing you do simply because it makes you feel alive. I convinced myself that was discipline, that people who lived in the moment were people who ended up with regrets and debt and a mess where their life should be. I was going to be different. I was going to have a perfect house. The perfection cost me something I didn't have a line item for. Our youngest, Kevin, came to visit several years ago. He was 38 at the time. He'd always been the more emotional of our 3 kids, the one who used to draw for hours when he was little, the one who cried at movies, who called home more than the other 2 just to talk. And over the years, those calls had gotten shorter, fewer. I thought it was just adulthood. People get busy. Families have their own lives. I told myself that was normal. He came to visit for a weekend, and we were sitting on the back porch the first evening. He had a beer. I had a glass of water. I'd given up alcohol 10 years before for health reasons, another optimized decision. And he said something that opened a window I hadn't known was closed. He said, "Dad, do you ever just sit and feel something?" Not accusing, genuinely curious, like he'd been wondering for years and finally decided to ask. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, like, not think about the next thing on the list, just feel whatever you feel. I started to give him an answer, probably something about how I find satisfaction in productivity, something logical. And he just sat there and waited, and the longer I talked, the more I could hear how hollow it sounded. Like someone describing a house they'd lived in for 30 years, but never sat down in. When I finished talking, Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I stopped calling as much because sometimes I feel like you don't need me to." He said it carefully, like he'd rehearsed it. Like you're so self-sufficient that there's no room for me in it. I don't know how to help you with anything or give you anything because everything is already handled. I sat with that for a long time. He didn't mean it as an accusation. He meant it as a sadness. He'd wanted to be needed by his father, and I'd managed myself so efficiently that I'd eliminated the need. I had built a life with no gaps in it. No gaps for spontaneity. No gaps for mess. No gaps for my own children to step into and be necessary. I went inside that night and I walked through the house. The spotless kitchen, the organized study, the closets sorted by season, everything exactly where it should be. And I thought, what is this place for? I'd spent 50 years building a life, and somewhere in the middle of the building, I'd forgotten that a life is not a structure. It's not something you complete. There is no finished version of a life. There is only the living of it, the ongoing, imperfect, irreducible experience of being present inside your own existence. I had not been present, I had been maintaining. After Kevin's visit, I started to change things. Small things first, because I'm still a man who likes order, and change does not come naturally to me. I started taking walks with no destination. Not exercise walks, I already had those. 3 mornings a week, timed and tracked. I mean walks where I left the house with no plan, and turned wherever I wanted, and came home when I felt like it. That sounds like nothing. It was enormous. I started saying yes to things I would have previously assessed and declined. Gloria wanted to take a pottery class. I thought it sounded messy and impractical. I said yes. I was terrible at it. I loved it. I have a lumpy, lopsided bowl on the kitchen shelf, now that I made with my own hands and placed there myself. And every time I look at it, I feel something I didn't feel when everything was perfect. I called Kevin Moore, not to update him on news, just to talk. He sounded different on the phone each time, more relaxed, more open, like talking to something that finally had space in it, like calling a house that someone actually lived in. Here's what I want you to hear. If your life looks perfect and feels hollow, that is not a mystery. That is cause and effect. A life obsessed with looking right from the outside pays for that perfection on the inside. The cost is presence, spontaneity, the messy, wonderful, unscheduled texture of actually being alive. You don't have to blow up the structure. You don't have to quit your job or sell the house or upend everything. You just have to make a little room. One afternoon with no agenda. One yes to something impractical. One conversation that isn't efficient. Let a little mess in. Not because mess is good, because you need to know you can survive imperfection. That your life doesn't depend on the perfection. That you are more than what you manage. I'm 77. My lumpy pottery bowl sits on the shelf. My lawn is no longer perfectly trimmed. I've accepted a little variation in the height. Kevin called me last Tuesday just to tell me something funny that happened at his office. The house I built is not as spotless as it used to be. It has never felt more like a home. This channel is about people learning the hard way what actually matters and sharing it, so maybe you don't have to figure it out at 77. If this found you at the right moment, subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave me a comment. What's one thing you've been putting off because it wasn't practical or it didn't fit the plan? Hit that like button. And if you have your own story worth telling, something you've lived through that could help somebody, there's a form in the description. Fill it out. Your story might be the one someone else needed today.